Have you ever found yourself wishing things at work made more sense? That you could spend less time sitting in meetings talking about work and more time just doing the work that gives you energy? The research says that most of us have these types of thoughts, that our jobs were more clear, that the workplace was more civil, and that we would, at the end of the day, turn our full attention to our personal lives without worrying about missing an email, a call, a text, or a work chat. In Gallup's State of the Global Workplace Report, the world's largest annual research initiative of its type, findings revealed that in companies with poor management practices, employees are nearly 60% more likely to be stressed than people who work in environments with good management practices. And it just makes going to work better for all of us. Today's guest, a biotech CMO, is proof that an engaged and respectful leadership style makes for a more healthy work environment, one that pays dividends to the team and the bottom line. So, if you're a manager or an aspiring manager, get ready to be inspired. And for the rest of you that wonder if going to work can feel better, different, here's the proof that it can. I'm Jen Phillips, and welcome to the Podgress Report. I have known today's guest for many, many years. In fact, he hired me to do one of my most fun jobs, which was working for what was then called Salesforce.org, or the philanthropic heart of Salesforce. And what I can tell you about this person is he is just a fantastic person to have discussions like the one we're about to have on Burnout, because he's a passionate, dedicated leader who is a marketer through and through, but he is also just a big beating heart and really cares for his employees in a way that is incredibly special. So I just want to say to you, Henk Campher, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today on the Podgress Report.
Fun to be, Jen. I mean, it's always been fun when we hang out, so it's going to be fun.
I agree. Now, Henk Campher, you are the CMO for Deep Origin. What is Deep Origin?
Well, there's a long explanation because it's biotech, or there's a snappy marketing one that I'll go to as simply we unfuck life sciences. It takes way too long to do drug discovery. If you think back like 20 years ago, it took 20, 30, 40 years ago, it took us 10 to 20 years from idea to drug to get it to market. It still takes us that long. We've got all this technology. So what we do is we cut through that bullshit, get the tools to the scientists who have the actual superpowers to unfuck life sciences so we can all live longer, happier, healthier lives.
Well, that sounds pretty amazing. And it sounds like a fun way to spend your day. You come to Deep Origin with a very deep and storied marketing past. You are a brand marketer through and through. You also have a background in corporate social responsibility, which I think is where you get that beautiful piece of you that is incredibly dedicated and human. And you've held executive positions with a lot of incredible brands. That said, you have also had the heartbreak of burnout in your own life at work. And so what we're going to be talking about with Henk today is not a marketing conversation, although he leads marketers. So let's jump right in.
Let's dive in.
First, let's start with you. You, as I said, have experienced burnout yourself. You have some learnings from that. But before we get into the learnings, I really just want to talk about what was your burnout experience?
Yeah, it was like most people, I think, you expect burnout to hit you. So it's like you go like, oh shit, now I'm burned out. And that it hits you like a 10-ton truck. With me, it didn't work that I didn't know that I was burned out because it was a slow burn. It was like just almost eating you up from the inside, bit by bit by bit. Until one day I realized, oh, I'm not as sharp as what I used to be. What I expect from myself. The places where, as a marketer, we get the most random ideas at the randomest of places. All of a sudden I realized I'm not having those random thoughts. And that's where the triggers came. It's like I was tired. I wasn't as motivated. And it wasn't just work. It was like, I love life. I love my job. I love everything about what I have. But when I have to go into a meeting, you go like, okay, I got to psych myself up to be the one to bring it. That was the most unnatural thing for me to do, to be able to have to think about bringing it to a meeting. And that's where I realized this is burnout. This is how burnout works for me. And I was a surprise because of the way that I've never let work run my life. It's not the center of my existence. I like my job, but I love life more than anything else. I'd never expected to have burnout because work isn't the center of my meaning. But it hit me with this kind of slow burn.
And so it was this gradual process, but at one moment you realize, oh, here's all these things that have changed in my life. I'm no longer having those epiphanies, those random acts of genius that are coming up that help me be the brand marketer that I am. I'm feeling like where you never had to think about rallying the troops. You just show up and the fun is there and the excitement is there. Having worked for you, I know that's true. And you weren't able to do that naturally anymore. And you realize probably in that moment, hey, it's been some time too.
Yeah.
That it's been that way.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I would say it happened over years where all of a sudden I realized, oh, shit, that was still possible back then just isn't possible today. And it filters through all the areas where I would find the moments like I'm like a random creator. It's like I have to play my shitty guitar, or play the guitar shitty rather. It's a good guitar. It's like, don't blame the guitar, Henk. Go for a run, write, and reading, all those kind of things. And where it hit me was actually about two years ago is where I realized, oh, it's burnout. And it actually came because of book reading of all things. I picked up a book that Heidi, my partner, she's in a great book club, and they had a book called Pachinko. And I picked up Pachinko to read, and I just absolutely fell in love with reading again. And that was one of those moments like, why did I stop reading? Why did I stop running? Why am I at this not improving on guitar? Like, I don't write a lot anymore, and I have to work for the ideas a lot more than before. And that's like the aha moment. But I didn't act on it even immediately. I still thought it's like, just do it and it'll come back. It's like eventually it's like, no, you got to change behavior. It's not gonna magically unburn.
Yeah. Well, actually, now that I'm having these conversations a lot, what I do notice is one of the through lines that I'm hearing from people, and also that I experienced myself, is that you keep trying to push through it.
Yeah.
To push through it, to rally past it, because that's worked for you in the past. And well, I'll speak for myself, because that worked for me in the past. I'll just keep pushing through it. And then magically I'll find on one of those pushes, on the other side of it is the me I recognize. And that for me did not happen. And it seems like potentially for you also didn't magically happen. You had to actually deal with what was happening to you.
Yeah, I think it's one of the mistakes we make as well as when we realize there's burnout is we focus more on the area where the burnout feels the most, and that's usually at work. So we double down on work. But the way you're going to deal with burnout isn't actually about doubling down on the work part. It's about everything else that actually helps you deal with the normal stresses in life. The guitar playing, the reading, the writing, the going crazy with the dogs, taking walks, having a beer, whatever gives you meaning and that stimulates you. It's like actually when you focus more on that is how you're going to deal with a burnout and have an impact back on your work. You have to know where are your release valves to recharge a little bit, and also just take a step back. Go like, what is your priorities? How do you deal with this?
Yes, to all of that. And something really important that you said that reminds me of some guidance that's in a great book that I'm going to link in the episode notes that's called Burnout is, here's the distinction. Your stress or work is not your stress. So if you're trying to fix the stressor, the work, it actually isn't addressing or releasing or fixing the stress that you are carrying with you. So when I heard it put that way, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense, because the stressor, the work that I kept trying to push through and rally past and keep going on wasn't really the problem I had to solve. The problem that you actually have to unlock in yourself, like you said, is the actual stress, the burnout, the burn. I like the way you put that. Okay. So you experienced this burnout. It was a slow burn. And then you tried what so many of us try, which is to rally past it. And that also didn't work for you. So then what happened? What did you do to actually begin to recover?
A few things. In a way, I was lucky during COVID that one of my release valves is Hawaii. So I actually spent time in Kauai, working from Kauai. I could still work, but changing the environment to where I know my soul feels the most rested and at peace, going there and being able to switch off because I've got habits there that impacts the way I can deal with stress, that actually helped. And then going back to some of the roots of how I've dealt with stress before. I never had to deal with stress before because I always made sure that I had clear lines on what I do, but I started letting those lines get blurred. And then I went back to those old rules. It's like, and it sounds stupid and people go like, it's absolutely impossible. And you're like, no, it's not impossible. Over weekends, I don't check anything work related. If it's really a crisis, text me. Guess how many people have texted me because it was an actual real crisis? 0. And in tech, we treat everything that's important, or actually everything that is a nice to have, as a crisis. So by putting back on those rules, like I don't check emails at weekends. I actually don't check it when I close my laptop at night. I use my phone as a tool to write, not to do work. So the first screen that you actually see on my phone is an app that allows me to write, that syncs around across everything that I do. I just went back to old rule that I knew that always helped me before. And that actually helped me get out of that because I spent more time on things that gave me more meaning, even if that thing meant nothing. Literally, I drove ID nuts. I went into like 2 years of falling in love with different making cocktails. I would get like a hype. It's like, I want to do gin cocktails, and then I'll learn, and then I'll buy a whole bunch of gin. And then she goes, so you're off the gin now? Because now I'm on something else. But actually helped me. It's like all those kind of different I wouldn't call it distractions because it isn't a distraction. It is part of what makes life. That helped. Just back to those old rules.
What we're talking about here is you set boundaries and put up those guardrails, those rules or guardrails, right? That said, I work between this time and this time. I don't work all of the time. So unless it is, and then I want to unpack this, but unless it is important or an urgent or a crisis, and you have rules for each of those as well, we'll talk about it when I'm back at work. And then you almost, by putting those boundaries up for yourself, you recaptured time. You reclaimed your time to live. And then you did another thing that is a recovery step for burnout, which is you took autonomy to take interest in something and then become expert in it or accomplish it. So yours might have been cocktail making. It might have been taking more time to go outside and run. It might have been rekindling your love of reading. But in those autonomy moments, you're actually then building back up your, I remember this guy. I know who I am. I'm actually Henk. And these are things that are important to me. And that replenished you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not naturally the most organized person because I know that my mind works best when there's slight chaos in it. If you ask me, like, get an idea, I'm going to stare at the blank screen and if I come up, yeah. I gave every part of my life equal value. And that's important. Like, work cannot be of more value than my life. Why would it? It makes an absolute no sense. So by saying, work, I'm giving you X amount of hours every day. And when I give it to you, you are number one priority. But when I switch off, understand that I don't switch off because I don't like you. I switch off because I also really like playing the guitar. And that's another priority. So when I set aside an hour a day to play guitar, that is as valuable as 8 hours. If I set aside an hour to write, that's as valuable. So when I started breaking my day up like that, it's like I get up at 5:15 in the morning, take the dogs out, with the 3 rescue, take them out, go for a run, get back, make breakfast, start work, switch off, make dinner. And that's not because I have a regime of doing all those things. It's just because I value each one of those. I love trying to make food, even though I suck at it. I love writing. I love reading. And by allocating time, each one has equal value. So now if I say, oh, work, that's fine. I'll just do another 2 hours tonight. I'm stealing from everything else has a value to me. And that's unfair. That's unfair for work to expect that, because it's like, and it's got nothing to do with money. It's got to do with life. So there's no work-life balance. There's just life. There's no work-life. There's life, and everything else has to fit into life and has to be of equal value. And I'm not saying it works for everyone. It works for me. Because then it also means I can focus on work and say, actually, how do I make work the most efficient way to doing work? And even there, I start breaking things up.
Oh, hi, it's Jen. For those of you new to the Podgress Report, a word on our mission. This is a podcast to educate, inspire, and engage people who know they need to do something different at work, but might not be sure what their healthy next career step is. And now I'm going to ask for you to engage. I want to hear from you. Do you have a burnout or career development question? Ask me anything. I'm planning upcoming episodes to highlight listener questions, so don't hold back. I've added the link in the episode notes, and thank you for being a part of this community.
We started this at Hootsuite, doubled down at Thinkific and Aorist, and then tripled down where I am at Deep Origin. I have 3 days of no calls and meetings. People go, does it seem
wait, but hold on. We need to stop here first before we jump right into that and explain. This guy has a team, right? So this isn't just Henk saying, I don't take meetings 3 days a week. Henk, what do you mean when you say we have 3 days of no calls or meetings?
Actually, most of Deep Origin. When you are in a meeting, you are not doing work. You are talking about doing work. You're not actually doing work. You're just talking about doing work. So when you have meetings, you look very busy, but you're not doing any outputs. That's just more inputs. Work is about achieving outcomes. And achieving outcomes has got very little to do, and we know that for a fact, very little to do with how much you put in. Focus more on the outcomes that you need to achieve. So by breaking my week up into Mondays is planning and team days. Monday morning, me and my team, we get together, we talk about what are we planning for the week? What's the actions that we need to take? What are the things that we need to move around, etc. We have our leadership meeting. We have our campaign meetings, everything on a Monday. Thursday, company time meetings, like your monthly company meeting, your training, your admin. That's a Thursday. That means that you can actually do work on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. Now, I do admit that there are moments when we break those rules because there's an actual crisis, or we're in the middle of execution. So we're executing something and it's like, hey, let's quickly put our heads together. Do we need to change this and execute? Or you have an actual client call. That's fine. Client's external. That's fine. Everyone complains. Everyone in every department complains about the same thing. I can't allocate enough time because I have a meeting, then I have 30 minutes off on another meeting, and that 30 minutes doesn't give me enough time to do actual work. So now I have to do work tonight. So the reason why you do work tonight is because of your shitty way of planning meetings internally. And it's impossible to get a meeting from me because Google Calendar has this beautiful thing. It says out of office. So if you try and book a meeting on a Tuesday or Wednesday or Friday with me, you literally have to Slack me, hey, can we? And then that's a barrier for people to overcome. They have to have a good reason to do that because we're a small company. I have availability to everyone. I also have this thing called the digital walkabout. And I introduced this at Hootsuite between 12 and 12:30 at every day. Anybody can call me and just have a chat. I don't care what you want to talk about. If you want to run an idea by me that's work related, if you want to talk to me about the Springbok rugby team winning the 2019 and 2023 Rugby World Cup, happy to talk about that every single day. But whatever you want to chat about, you have that half an hour. So anything ad hoc comes up, boom, have that chat then. So I am available. It just means that we just have to be a little bit more focused because that's how you eat your time up.
I love the idea of structuring it and getting as many people invested in that practice of on these days we meet and on these days we work. It allows you the ability to have epiphanies, the ability to put your head down, to focus. I think that organization is giving you the opportunity of focus. What you're describing, where everybody says, I can't focus because I have a meeting and then a half an hour. And by the time I've got my head ready to work, I got to get ready for another meeting. And it's relentless and it's jarring to try, especially for, I think for anyone, but especially for a creative, that the process, like you said, if you tell somebody, okay, you have 15 minutes, come up with something great, it's difficult. You can't call that on demand.
Yeah.
I want to ask this one question before we go on. You said important, urgent, or crisis. And you defined that. What is an important, scenario? What is an urgent scenario? What's a crisis scenario? And does everybody understand that across the organization?
No one will ever understand it across the organization, but that's part of when you start off. It's like you have to teach people and you have to get people to support the idea of do you understand the differences between them? But it actually becomes an easy tool for people to use in their own jobs as well. Nice to have is something that is not part of an OKR or, VTMOM, whatever you want to call it in your company. If it's not in the plan, it's not important. Be clear. If it is a new idea somebody has, great. I have a whole thing called the parking lot of ideas. You can put it in the parking lot of ideas. Guess what? At the end of each quarter, we'll revisit all those ideas that people come up, because companies don't die because of a lack of ideas. Companies die because of a lack of execution. So anybody has another idea, put that in the parking lot. What is important is what's in the plan. It's the activities we agree to as a company and as a team. This is what we're going to focus on. That's important. What is urgent? Urgent is if something that is going to drive your biggest single, in any company that I've worked at and learned this at Salesforce. At every company since, I've used this principle. What's the one number that rules them all? At Salesforce, ACV. Everything else is vanity. If you can hit ACV.
So hold on. ACV for the unindoctrinated is, think of it as a revenue. Think of it as revenues.
Yeah. Like Thinkific, we had new paying customers. But for each company, it's like, what's the one thing that's the most important? Now, if you're in real danger of not hitting that becomes urgent. That's urgent. So important is everything that's in plan. Nice to have is everything that's not in plan. Urgent is if something is happening that you're not going to hit that number, and have the systems in place that'll trigger that for you. Like back at Salesforce, we looked at the funnel every Monday, and then we'll know what's hot and what's not. Crisis is if you don't deal with it today, the company is going to come to a screeching halt. That's the only time it's a crisis. But we often confuse important and urgent with a crisis, because a real crisis hardly ever hits a company. That's a reality. It's like a real crisis doesn't actually hit a company. In all of my time, I've had maybe one crisis that I can truly go that was a crisis. And we had to deal with, and it had more to do with external more than anything else. So being able to do that makes people go oh shit, we all know what we need to do. What is important is our daily tasks, and that's what we focus on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday to execute against is what's important. We'll deal with a Monday to discuss anything that's urgent because we might not hit a number whenever we review our numbers. Do we need to change our behavior this week to be able to deal with that? And a crisis is a crisis.
You define then, and you start indoctrinating everybody into the idea of what important is, what urgent is, and what a crisis is. And when your laptop is down, it's got to be a crisis to reach out. What urgent, is that something where after hours somebody is reaching out to you?
No, put it in Slack because it means that I have to deal with it first thing in the morning. It's nothing I can do overnight that's going to change that urgency. I'm not all of a sudden, because it's not going to come to a screeching halt. We just have early indicators that says that we have to change something to be able to deal with it. And an urgency, you have a few days to try and fix what you have to do in any case. If you feel like it, you can text me so that it's a reminder. But again, people don't text because they go like, well, is it really that urgent that Henk has to deal with it tonight versus tomorrow? I've been lucky to work with founders whose ego is in check, that understands the difference between those things as well. So that's, text me if it's a crisis, me in Slack if it's urgent. Everything else is like, report will tell us the important stuff is getting done or not.
Yeah. And the reason that I love this so much, Henk, is you're a man of many philosophies. And one of the philosophies that you employ, and I absolutely bet you've got it going on at Deep Origin, is Ubuntu, right?
Yeah.
And before I go on and kind of tie these two things together, why don't you talk a little bit about that as a life philosophy?
So I'm from South Africa, and my first part of my life, I was an anti-apartheid activist and did development work in Africa. Ubuntu literally just means I am because we are. It's a slightly different, it's not a right or wrong, it's a slightly different view of the world from a Western view, where in a Western view, it is the individual is the center of activity. And that's great. But for where I come from, my place and whatever I do is in the community and my role within that community. And it's not an expectation. It's not a job. It's just the way you are. It's just the way I am. It's like, I know I am best surrounded by people who are not like me. So we live and die by team. And I would always put money on that. So if you look after your team and you look after each other, that's how you're going to be best. So it doesn't help I have behavior that isn't reflected in the team, that the team doesn't have the ability to have that same behavior. So when I have these kind of rules of like, hey, don't contact me, don't text me, I don't want to see it from them. The idea of Ubuntu is like, if you accept the responsibility of your job, I'm not going to micromanage you. Tom Kaiser, that I had at Hootsuite, CEO there, had this great saying of like, he's very comfortable hiring and managing people way smarter than you. And we're like, yes. I always tell people like, what saved my ass at Salesforce? Jen Phillips. He was like the yin and yang. But it's like, I try and tell my teams as well, I don't even want to see you email at night. I don't do that, because then all of a sudden you expect people are going to get an email at 10 o'clock, even if they see it the next morning, they go like, maybe Jen wanted me to check it last night. And then all of a sudden they change their behavior, and now they putting in hours that they shouldn't be putting in. And they're not focusing on the other things of value that makes them a complete person. And that complete person brings the value to the business.
You have this philosophy and you live it. And I've experienced working with you, so I know that you actually live it. You have this framework now of not important, urgent, and crisis that you've put into play at 3. Now, this is your 3rd time actually putting it into play. And you expect, it's not just how you work with me, Henk, it's also, this is how we work together as a team. This is what I expect. And then when you are off, my team are off. And as a result, not just here, but in other organizations where you've done this, what has been the result for the team?
Yeah, there was probably the number that I'm the proudest of in my outside of ACV and stuff like that. Right. Actually, including that, the number that I'm the proudest of in everything that I've worked on was the number at Hootsuite, is the engagement number. team engagement. When I joined, the team was leaderless for a year. They had the lowest engagement score across the company, 67%, which isn't horrible, but it's pretty low. 2 years later, when I left, we were at 97%. But it's because of those rules that we have. We know the plan. We all agree on what we have to do. I'm going to give you the responsibility to fail your plan. I hate somebody telling me something to do, and I go like, say, if I fail, it's your fault, right? Not my fault, because it was your plan. It wasn't mine. And that's why I often don't like leaders who look down at their people and go like, well, did you give them the freedom to fail, or did you just force them to do your job? So give people the freedom to fail within the plan. And by the way, failing is also a good thing. We learn new things and new muscles, but have their back and then put the rules down hard. And we actually tested this with HR. We didn't just introduce deep work at Hootsuite. We didn't just introduce it. We actually ran 2 teams on it, my team and another team. We tested with HR, blinded surveys behind it. And people were skeptical at the beginning who participated. When we were done after our first 6 months, everybody loved it. Productivity went up, engagement went up, outputs went up, people's stress levels went down, because we measure that. It's like, do you have more time? All of those kind of things just changed. So because of that, that's why my engagement score went up. But at that same time, when the engagement score went up, is every single other output went up. Every single measurement we used in marketing went up. And if you say, like, what's the science? Is it correlation or is it not? But we had greater share of voice, greater brand awareness. All of a sudden, our engagement and our leads went up. Our revenue growth went up. When we introduced this, Hootsuite went from flat growth to 20% growth within 12 months. Now, is that all because of one thing? No. But we know from the numbers, engagement went up and everything else went up at the same time that engagement score went up. And it's not actually rocket science. Think about it, especially from not just marketing, anywhere in a company, in tech especially. So when you burned out, when you spending too much time on work, when you're not recharging, you can't deliver the quality of work that you should be. So the reason why you should have those times set aside to do everything else, because business benefits from it. I am a better creative when I do that. My team created the best content ever at Hootsuite when I literally told them, you're not going to have any meetings on a Wednesday. You're just not going to be in meetings and emails. Be creative. Do whatever recharges you. If you want to try and solve a problem, do that.
The most important thing I think that you said was you measured all of this. And you saw that when we co-create a plan, we give people the accountability to work within their strengths and their skills to do the work. And then we give them time for focus. And we also release from them this stress, which is that always on feeling. I always have to be on. Oh shit, I went to sleep at night and then 3 Slacks came in. That's okay. That's okay. And you said, you can go and live your life. This is one part of your life. It is not your life. But the things that make your job meaningful are these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. This is what you have and you're accountable to in our plan. And every week we're going to inspect it and make sure that people are working the plan. And if there's things that we need to adjust, we adjust them. But in the meantime, please go recharge yourself and live the rest of your life, your whole life.
Exactly. And as leaders, we just have to make sure that we're available. So that if we give teams and individuals the freedom to do, I want people to love what they do. So I have to remind them, why did you get involved in this part of the business or marketing in the first place? Go do that. Go do that. We give people that kind of freedom. It flows out into everything else they do. But you have to lead by example as well. And you know this maybe from my Salesforce days. When I go on vacation, you cannot get hold of me. I don't take my work laptop with me. I delete all work-related apps off my phone. The only way you can get hold of me is texting me. And by the way, even if you text me, I likely don't have my phone on me, so I'll check it tonight.
That was nerve-wracking for me.
I
mean, just quite honestly, that's a toughie. I don't know if I even like that even now. Yes, I can, dear listener, I can confirm that is actually the truth.
But think back again, and every single person that's worked with me will, I hope, have the same answer. In that time, did you ever really need me? No, there was no decision that you were going to make that I was going to so fundamentally disagree with that we needed to change course. The only reason why you would want me is to confirm that, by the way, Jen, you're going to make the smartest decision in any case.
Yeah.
So,
and that's why I think, Hank, like just totally understand you're a man of many philosophies. Totally understand. But it really, I think, depends on the team. You had pretty capable, mature, senior people who reported to you. So yeah, they had it. I wasn't probably going to be the one that needed to call you, or text you or whatever, just Slack you or any other channel. But yeah, I think it really does depend on whether or not you have those people on your team. There are people out there that maybe only have one other person on their team, and that person may be junior. So they need that security blanket. You're lucky. You're a lucky person to have had such great people working for you. Okay, wait. I got to talk to you about something here. So you talked about the framework, not important, urgent, and crisis, and living that not just for what works for Hank, but what works for us as a team. And then benefit to the team, which is, hey, everybody's going to be happier. Everyone's going to be more engaged. Everyone's going to have time to actually focus and do that inspired work. And everybody is really, really clear on what they're committed to in the plan. And we're measuring that every week. I love all of that. And you talked about what the actual business benefits were at Hootsuite, and having a 30 percentage point increase in your team's engagement over a period of, what'd you say, 3 years?
Yeah, it was closer to a year and a half.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
I mean, that's even more remarkable, honestly, is stunning. And why it's stunning, I want to really make sure I get to this. Global Gallup Indicators of Workplace Performance and Social Health. So Gallup does the largest global study on workplace health. And they have a bunch of factors which they call indicators. And one of the largest reasons for attrition as a whole within a company is the engagement and culture and work-life balance and well-being groups. The two top reasons that people leave any organization are those two groups. The third one is money. So I'm saying over money is culture and engagement and work-life balance and well-being, those two groups. What you did then is you not only increased your team's engagement, but you also decreased likely attrition, or the reason that most people leave a company. Why that matters is because companies are more profitable and have better growth indicators. We can talk about some of those when people are engaged. So you set a culture of health that it's not just good for the people on your team or the people that you work for and with. And I know that's why you're likely starting to do it. But it actually is incredibly beneficial to the business. And that's not me saying that. That's Gallup doing the world's largest study on workplace engagement and the implications of an engaged workforce. So I want to talk now about, with you, boundaries being important for people. You already touched on how boundaries are important for the business. What are the OKRs that you're watching that would be proving that what you're doing with the operations of how you work together is actually benefiting Deep Origin?
Yeah, so it's still around engagement, but we're lucky we're a small company.
Right.
But it's also engagement across the company. So how aligned are we? So on OKRs, we have three. One is, launching products because we're in the product making business. Two, it is generate revenue, sustainable revenue. And the third leg of the stool is a high-performing team and organization. And that is all about how we are in sync. The kind of startup mentality is the idea of there's this constant change that constantly happens in a company. But only by knowing what the plan is can you allow that constant change to happen And as long as you have great engagement. So we've hyper focus on that. To be honest, until I joined Hootsuite, I never worried about the measurement. It's like I always go like, I'm going to have a team that believes in the principle of Ubuntu. We're going to have fun, and we're not going to be arsehole, and we'll do the crazy stuff. And at Hootsuite, they measured it. And I was like, now we know that it's actually the right stuff. And what we realize is when we have these definitions of what people can or cannot do, the freedom, the days where they can deep focus, we had a lot more time to do things out of plan. Because people were actually way more productive in generating the output for the outcomes we want to achieve. And that was just, well, compare the plan before, same amount of people, compare the plan today. Why are we all of a sudden executing at a much higher level than before? Well, it's because we're actually focusing on execution. We're actually making sure that people, when they work, they focus on execution instead of, I've got to do it tonight because I've got 1,000 different meetings. Remove the obstacles that gets you to execution. So that philosophy of deep works, again, as long as you focus on what's the outcomes, what's the things you have to do to get there, and what are the things you can remove from. Why do people work longer hours? Is not because they're adding more work, it's because they're adding more things that doesn't actually translate into work.
I'm starting to think of that as low value time. So you're spending time and it's at work, but it's not high value. And I guess what I would say value is it in the plan? Does it materially add to that number? What you've just talked about is you gave people time back to do their actual job. And because they had so much time back, they could do more of their actual job while still respecting the rest of their life. If I would think about what would make me feel kind of fired up to be in a place, it's like what I said I was going to do when I came here, I'm able to do, and I can do more of it than I expected because I spend less time locked into a room talking about something that we don't need to be talking about.
Yeah. For managers, that's our role. Our job is to get everything out the way of people that get in the way of people doing their work. Just remove all of them.
I want to remind everybody, you really doubling down on this started when you realized something was wrong with you.
Exactly.
So you started putting up these guardrails for you. And then because you have this philosophy of we are all essentially a single culture. So if it's going to work for me, it needs to work for all of us. You made that in the DNA of the culture was we're going to all work in a way that respects the rest of our life. And as such, people, I'm sure I can almost sense people probably, like you said, freaked out at the beginning because they're like, how am I actually going to fit that in now? And you succeeded because people started feeling the benefit of it. I'm only meeting on things that are actually important.
Yeah.
And or urgent and or a crisis. I'm not meeting on things that are not important. Hey, you had a great idea. Terrific. Add it to the parking lot.
Yeah. And I have to say, I'm also lucky where I am today because I'm surrounded by engineers and scientists. So it's a case of like, yeah, data tells us this works. A scientist doesn't want to spend time talking about science. They want to do science. It's the same with engineers. They want to code. Don't want to talk about coding. So you have those stand-ups and those kind of things to move quickly. But I'm lucky that we're in a culture that questions the norm. Because our team isn't a team of managers, it's a team of scientists and engineers. They don't try and control what they can't control. That's one other thing I have to say is like, I've also learned two things. One is what you were saying earlier. I can only implement what I want to implement for the changes for me to handle stress if everybody does it, because else I'm constantly going to fight these other things being thrown at me. The other thing that's been part of my philosophy that helps me deal with it as well is like, understand the difference in what I control versus what I only influence. Because the things that's going to drive you nuts are the things you can only influence. Like most of the discussions that I've ever had in businesses where there are conflicts is when people try and control things that they can actually only influence. Guess what those things are? Other people's jobs, other departments. It's like, that's going to drive you nuts if you hyper-focus on that. Focus on the things you can control. Where do you start? You start with yourself. What can I control myself? What can I control within the team with different dynamic? Don't worry too much about the stuff that's going to drive you crazy. Put that in the parking lot. We'll deal with that later.
But I do need to bring up that depends on the person's health in the moment, the person's stress health. Because part of burnout is that there's a dimension which is all around professional efficacy, right? So do you feel like you're doing a good job? And if your job is dependent on other people and you are feeling like without those people doing what they're accountable to, I'm not able to do my job well, it does reduce your professional efficacy. So this is where strong leadership does what you just said and says, don't worry about that today. Today's not the day to worry about it. Or if today is, you get involved. But on our Monday meeting, we'll drive that accountable discussion to say, what are we going to do about this thing, this important thing that is in our plan that is now with you, sitting in your court that we need you to produce on. So I think that is the role of a manager as well, is to keep scrutinizing along those dimensions, the professional efficacy, the mindset, and the ability to have energy to do the job. You have homed very, very hard in on the energy and the efficacy, but also the mindset, making sure you're seeing, is somebody still able to have a positive mindset about where they are, what they're doing, and whether or not they're excited about it. And I think you've done a really good job on that too, by giving them the freedom to do their job with autonomy. You experienced burnout, and to help yourself live your full life, you've employed these boundaries, which were, I think, incredibly effective at driving engagement for your entire team. And not only were they effective at driving engagement, but you saw business benefits that seemed to at least be correlated with those changes. What I also think you gave back to people is that when you said, we're going to work this way with this framework and respect your time, people were spending less time in low-value work and more time doing high-value work. And as such, then they were more productive, which is very exciting for anybody, including the company, who benefits from that higher productivity. You're living this really important example. I talked about it in episode 1, where we just broke down the componentry of burnout. And it is this: 40% of workers believe that burnout is a requirement of success. And you here are setting an example, and it's all leaders' responsibilities, I believe, to set the example that is not true, and prove it by having the entire team show that when we respect ourselves and don't burn out, we're actually more productive.
Oh, yeah. It is, for me, it's like, it's the weirdest thing when I know that you only get paid for your brain. And when you burned out, your brain is not as smart. It's not as fast. So it's like, so if you believe that, then you believe in delivering second tier level work. Is that what you're saying? Because every single person that's been the highest performer in my teams has always been the people who are the happiest, the most engaged, and have a life. That's the people that's driven the business, that inspires businesses, that leads businesses. So yeah, I think it's still a hangover from a lot of the 80s and 90s mentality, that I'm hoping that what we're seeing with Gen Z is go like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. There's life. There's only life.
Yes. And that's another great takeaway, is that there is no work life. There is only life. And you have to take ownership of the amount of time you're willing to give to your work, and then just bring it 100% when you're in that time, and recharge yourself. Live the rest of it, not recharge yourself for work. Live the rest of your life. And in so doing, you come to work a whole person ready to be productive and clear and like super effective because you're engaged.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest proof point. The engagement increase of 30 points that you saw at Hootsuite. Here's what I know about engagement. This is from a Gallup, the Global Workplace Report. When managers are engaged, as you are, employees are 5 times more likely to be engaged. The highest performing companies with the highest employee engagement have 23% higher profitability, 17% higher sales productivity, and 10% higher customer loyalty. Like you were seeing, you had that market share increase, and lower absenteeism, turnover, and theft.
Yeah. That makes
I mean, it's like the numbers are with us.
exactly.
Why can't we live this example? The numbers and the data, as you say, are with us.
Yeah. And we often have to go look for data for things that are obvious. I was at the office last week. When I walk out of meetings there, I am so ready for the next thing, because when we spend time together in meetings, we do it deliberately. We do it for problem solving. We are highly engaged, and you walk out of there and you're like, I feel ready for the next thing, versus, oh man, this is another meeting. It's like, of course, when you're psyched about those moments, when you enjoy the time you spend together, it actually inspires you for other things. I know when I'm good at work, I'm actually good at writing. I'm actually good at running. I'm actually good at everything else. It's all tied together. It's not that running helps work. Work helps running. We have to remember our privilege. Most of us are, especially in the world of LinkedIn. If you are on LinkedIn, you are highly likely to be one of the privileged few in this world. And don't deny that privilege. It's like I live an extremely privileged life for where I am. And most of us, if we have access to the internet, we can listen to podcasts, we can engage on social, especially on LinkedIn. We are privileged. Make privilege work for you. Don't deny it, because the alternative, you don't want to go there. The alternative is a really dark place. So remember that. So that's why it's important to break everything up into all the different parts, because you have a rare opportunity in this world to actually live a balanced life, to live a life, versus most people in this world can't. So
Right.
don't let it drag you down. Let that be the inspiration to go do all those things that fit into the puzzle that's called your life.
Wow. Here you are, leading by example, improving your company's engagement. And what I'm really proud of, really, for having worked with you and also having heard these stories of the continuation of you and your role, is that you are setting an example that breaks the belief that to be successful, you must burn out. And I think that, to me, is probably a legacy maybe that you wouldn't necessarily think of as your legacy, but to be setting that in a world where 40% of us believe it's true is huge, and really strong leadership. And I appreciate you for that. And I appreciate you for being here today to talk about it. And one last ask of you, Henk, what are you thinking is your next big facet or change in your philosophy to help you continue down the exciting road you're on?
You know, what's happened in the last, I would say, year or two is increasingly things like, what's important, urgent, crisis, the boundaries, different just philosophies that I have. People are going like, have you written this down? No, why would I write it down? So I'm actually writing it down. I'm actually writing a book about ways that I feel like you can thrive in life, in work. How to not just survive work, but how you can actually thrive in work because you can thrive in life. So these kind of different philosophies and stories from my background, I'm just putting it together in a book. But that's what I'm busy doing right now. And it's been a fun exercise to put it all down into words, and hopefully by sometime later this year, I'll have it together in a book that I feel proud enough of to share.
Well, I'm excited to see where that takes you. I think a lot of people could benefit from reading that book. I really do. So I can't wait. I'm first in line. I thank you so much, Henk Campher, for being here with me to talk about this, and really appreciate the leadership example that you're setting by living with intentional boundaries within your team and also driving it across the rest of the company. So the team has a benefit of everybody speaking the same language in a way that helps them feel better about themselves and also be more productive at work.
Thank you. I always love hanging out with you. So this is a great time. Thank you very much.
Today, you heard from a passionate, dedicated leader that there is no work life. There is only life. And that to be our most effective at work, we need to live our full life and release stress rather than pushing through our stressors. Henk's reacquainting himself with boundaries after experiencing his own slow burnout, actually inspired him to lean into the power of boundaries, clear definitions of not important, important, urgent, and crisis, having accountability to an aligned plan, and as a leader, pushing ambiguity and obstacles out of the way. Those things have proven in Henk's last 3 executive stints to be good for the people on his team and great for the bottom line and healthy for Henk. You know, I love a win-win-win, and I hope you heard something today that sparked your optimism, or for you leaders out there, gave you food for thought on changes you can bring in to your organization, to your team, to make the workplace a better place. I promise you that following Henk on LinkedIn is not boring. He's taking the summer hiatus, but will be back in full force later this year. I've added his profile link to the notes, as well as the book Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle, which I've referenced earlier in the episode. If you like what you're hearing on the Podgress Report, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss any of our upcoming reports. Your reviews help us as well, so if you're loving this content, please give us a review. Thank you so much for being here together with me and with Henk Campher. We really can help each other and help make the workplace a better place as we grow. Until next time, here's to your progress. Hi, it's Jen with some very important fine print. This podcast and its associated properties does not provide medical or mental health advice. The information, including but not limited to, recorded in live episodes, text, graphics, images, and any other material contained on the property or the podcast are for your informational purposes only. Nothing on the Podgress Report is intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. And please, if you're under duress or considering suicide, please reach out right this very minute to the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988 in the U.S. or searching for the helplines available to you in your country.